Hello there, outliers. Niiamah is Sean here, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey here today. We have an incredible roundtable. I have Billy Ryan here with me, and I'm just really excited to dive in deep on leadership, how people show up in the world, and how you can continue to elevate your game as it goes along. Billy, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for showing up in the world, and thanks for being in on this conversation right now.
No, pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Niiamah.
Yeah. Well, I want outliers to get to know you. You mind sharing more about you and the game you're currently playing?
Sure. Yeah. And no pun intended. I come from a little bit of a sports background as far as the game that I'm playing. So I was an athlete through college and from there spent 15 years in professional sports working in Major League Baseball. Started as a scout, so evaluating talent, progressed up to senior executive roles, a couple different organizations. A few years back, I exited the sports world for some personal reasons and have ventured into a few different industries since then. And I currently am a leadership coach trying to help people leverage some of the lessons that I've learned. Not all from the world of sports, but a lot of them, leverage that in their everyday life, in their business, in their careers, and in any way, shape, or form that they need some help.
I love this here. Like the one of the things I want to dive in right now is like it feels like you've had to reinvent yourself a couple different times along the way, right? And outliers out here, we're we are just really great at having hyphens and commas and like
Sure.
so tell me a little bit here. I think what I want to get into is not about necessarily about your path. Like I think we get that. I'm curious about what is it that like what is it that makes it you able to be successful, like jumping from one arena to the next, like you're like in sports, then executive, then you did a couple different things. Now you're in this field. What is it about you that makes that shine?
Sure. Yeah. The analogy, I'll try not to use too many sports analogies
No,
with you,
go
but
for it. Go for it. Just
the one I use a lot when I'm trying to help folks when they're building a team or they're trying to maybe hire, make an important hire. I always I embrace the philosophy of hire for character, train for skill. There is a baseline of tactical expertise in certain roles that you have to have, right, to get in the door. Beyond that, for me, it's a lot of it is culture fit. A lot of it is general learning agility and adaptability. I'm fortunate that I've been able to sort of flex some of those muscles as I've transitioned out. But the analogy I use is when you're playing pickup basketball and you're choosing sides, you say that guy's pretty athletic. At worst case scenario, he can rebound and play defense. He may not be able to shoot a lick, but he can probably help me win. And so I've tried to embrace that. I've transitioned out of sports and did some other industries, and I'll be the first one to acknowledge and raise my hand. I don't know anything about that area, right? Or I don't know anything about this area. And at the same time, lean on what I do know, and so um, you may not be able to do that in every single environment, but I've been fortunate that I've been put into positions where I've been trusted to build some things and lead some initiatives that I was able to do it. I was able to lean on sort of what I knew, um, which kind of led me into this coaching path, quite honestly, because it was something that I realized a lot of the lessons that I've learned over the years, a lot of the muscles that I've kind of developed are really valuable and applicable to almost any industry. And I think a lot of folks have those. I think we fall victim to this hyper specialization, this idea that I'm a subject matter expert, and that's where my value comes from. I'm sort of proven that I'm proof of concept that you can go do other things even if you don't have the subject matter expertise. You just kind of have to admit that primarily to yourself first and foremost, but then to the teammates and your colleagues that you're working with that I don't have it all figured out, but I've got some of it figured out, and I'm going to do some listening when I need to, and I'll speak up when I have to.
all right. This is really awesome for me, Billy. The because there's a level of being real, and also just a high degree of awareness that's also with it, right? Knowing what like where your strengths are, and what's outside of your wheelhouse. Uh, I know you work with teams, and I think about this when I think about the like corporate world, right? And there's oftentimes a feel that you're not allowed to let people know that you don't know, and so the way that you said it just came off honestly, I trust you more, how is it that like when you're either working with teams or when you see this here, how can outliers out there leverage honesty, truth, like it didn't come off as humility, it just felt like awareness, you know what I'm saying, like you didn't feel like less than because of it. So, like, can you share a little bit more
Yeah,
about
no,
that?
I think there's a few things that I've learned. I mean, one, I've been fortunate. Some of the best leaders that I've worked with have had that authenticity and that humility to be willing to say, I don't know, guys. I need some help. I've made, multi-million dollar decisions during a trade deadline or selecting players in a draft. And they've walked into a room, they closed the door with their inner circle and they've said, guys, I need some help. I don't know which direction I'm going to go. I'm conflicted. Okay. So let's workshop this. The other thing that I've learned from sports and baseball in particular is it's a game of failure. The greatest hitters in the history of the game fail 7 out of 10 times. You're a 300 career hitter. If you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're in the Hall of Fame. So if you start encountering people that whose job, like it was like mine, to evaluate those players, and there's a maybe an inflated sense of confidence or certainty, immediately for me it's a red flag because it's like this the player doesn't know most of the time, right? So how am I going to know a couple layers removed from that with such level of certainty conviction? So the big word that I picked up, or the big phrase I suppose I picked up in my career baseball, was always for me. It softens a little bit. I can have as strong an opinion as and as much conviction as I want, but if you and I are in a debate, I'm going to say, look, for me, this is what I saw. Okay. I'm not saying I'm right because I might have caught him on a good day or a bad day, but here it is for me. And so I just think that people respond to, I know I do, I know respond to authenticity. You respond to vulnerability. You want people that aren't always vulnerable, right? And aren't always admitting what they don't know. You want some people that have some authority and some ability to charge up the hill when they need to. But someone who knows everything or claims that they do, there's a level of distrust that creeps in for me because nobody's that good. There's the reality of it out there. There's a lot of challenges in life. There's a lot of challenges in business. And if you claim to know it all, that's in my mind, that's when you expose yourself and you're vulnerable in a negative way.
Yeah, I love that. There's a different type of vulnerability that takes place, but it's like now it's less in I don't know, less in your wheelhouse, less in your control is what's coming out here. It's like you're still making
Yeah,
yourself
it's
vulnerable. You just
yeah, well, it's
chose
vulnerable. It's vulnerable, but it's not the vulnerable you want to go for, right? It's almost like
exactly.
you got a target on your back at that point. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, I thought the way that you brought it in was really real, and I think that especially because a lot of the outliers here, like they're stepping into new things for themselves, right? And for today's conversation, I'll use the lens of like stepping into building out their business in the place where they've been successful on their own, or they've been successful with a certain size of team and so forth. But the next level is requiring something different from them. The next level is they're realizing that like their hands are still too much in, too much in either the day to day or getting in the way. And they're learning, how do I leverage team in a way that works, and how does that actually, like, what's my style of leadership and such along the way. What have you found to be, let's do two things. I'm going to ask you this one first. I'll ask you this one mainly based on your clients and your experience with your clients, and then I'm probably going to ask you about like you, because I think that's like outliers out there really curious about like all right, how does Billy play this game,
sure.
um but when it comes to leaders who are stepping into their next level of leadership, and part of that becomes being able to let go of things that they had been doing, regardless of whatever level they're taking on. I'm curious about how, like, either some of the bigger problems that you see them running into, or some of the beliefs that they have that tend to be like the opposite is actually true. What comes to mind
Yeah,
on that?
no, 100%. It's a lot of high performers struggle with the ability to delegate.
Mm,
They have driven it. If you're a founder of a startup, sometimes you drive that single handedly to a point of considerable success. But it really doesn't matter what your ultimate goals are in that business. Eventually, you are going to plateau. Nobody may be able to tell you when that's going to be. It may be a month in, it may be 10 years in. But really, I think one area that high performers wrestle on is that ability to delegate, and it tends to be delegation out of necessity rather than proactive and thinking through it in a sort of a team and an organizational building through that lens, if you will. And so a lot of people struggle with that because it's hard to trust somebody else sometimes to do something when you know with certainty that today they can't do that at as high a level as you can. But where you need to be able to zoom out as a leader is say, okay, but sort of that teach a man to fish philosophy, right? If I do it every single day, this right hand person that I have next to me is never going to grow, never going to grow, or this junior person I had that I brought on to help me is never going to get any better. And so it's finding that balance between being high performing and demanding and driving it, because sometimes you just need to be that person, and knowing when to kind of throttle back and put your arms around somebody and say, okay, let's come along for the ride, right? I'll take the B plus performance instead of the A plus today, because I know it's going to lead to more A plus days 5 years from now. And that's hard to do, right? That's disciplined. And sometimes you're just scraping by and clawing for survival, and you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. But it takes a disciplined approach. And then look, the other leg to that stool in my mind is identifying that team. Right? You need to know who you need to be surrounding yourself with. Who is your tribe, and why are you seeking out that kind of person? Are you seeking out somebody that's just going to say yes, right, and nod along to whatever you want to do? Or are you going to seek somebody out that's going to challenge you, that's going to complement your skill set, that you can develop and grow? There's a lot of different sort of quote unquote right answers there, but you have to be intentional about it. And it's hard to do. I mean, I spent 15 years trying to figure it out. Predicting human behavior is very challenging. And I had a client recently. We were talking about the explosion of remote work, and I know it's a different time, but if when I was 23 years old, if you just handed me a laptop and sat me in my living room and said, "Okay, go be a professional," I don't think I would have done very well, you know, because I didn't know what that meant. I hadn't seen it yet. And so you're just gonna kind of fumble your way through it. So there's a lot to unpack there, but ultimately, I think it's about team building. I think it's about knowing what you're trying to build and why, and knowing when to shoot the ball, when to pass it. Sometimes it's better to kind of just pass the ball off and let somebody else take that shot. Win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, there's a few different things that are flying through me as you say that. Um, I was also really struck by the know when to shoot or pass. Like I just felt like that's something I can take with me. Just kind of thinking about that and like, okay, where am I going? Yeah, as you were talking, Billy, there's a component there that really struck me in terms of to the simplicity of things, but also like how things can be simple but not necessarily easy. Right. And so as you're talking, like candidly, I'm reflecting my own about my own business right now. And you're asking questions where I used to work at one of the big four accounting companies and consulting and such, right? So I'm like, I know what professional looks like, but I was literally just talking about it this morning. I was like, when I came off and I did this on my own, I chose to go about it a certain way. I wanted to get rid of XYZ. And then like you eventually get back to oh, this is what it's supposed to
Right.
look like. There's a reason
Yeah.
why they do this.
They were
You
right
know,
all
they
along,
were
damn it.
right all along, but now I get to choose the colors and it's my value. But
Right.
yeah, so hey, that's one of the conversations that was going through my mind. And the other part of it that was as we were talking, I was like, this is one of the things I think is valuable about having someone by your side, a coach, bringing someone in to be able to have this time to think it through. Because I find myself now like I have to spend so much time like going with like GPT to try and get an answer, and it's like it doesn't have actually have experience. Hey, it
Yeah.
takes like I'll go by. I'm like, this, if I just had someone who actually understood what was going on, like this would have been like a 1 day, like strategy day where we could have put everything out on the wall, see it all, see where the vision is, see where the strategy is, see what the team is, and then ask all the questions that you're asking, be able to talk it back with someone who actually understands what's going on and can keep the whole picture in mind, as opposed to 3 weeks later, we're still asking questions and we're formulating our way through. So, what do you got on that? That was just my experience as you're going through. I was like, oh yeah,
Well, that's the thing that's what's jumped out at me about AI, right?
yeah,
We saw a data analytics revolution in professional sports, and it got a lot of attention. And um, I felt this way years ago, and we're sort of at that point now where eventually there's going to be more or less a level playing field with respect to access and ability to sort of interpret that data. And so really the power is going to come from being able to distill that information down and synthesize that in a way where it gets into, in this case, the player's hands, so they can actually do something with it and make it actionable. That's kind of how I feel about AI. There's this just an immense amount of information, but it's like you handed me 8 encyclopedias at once. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? It's paralysis by analysis. So your point about coaches is that's where I think it's actually become more valuable in my mind, is that human element, that ability to sort of interpret what you're reading and do it in a real world application and understand sort of the blind spots and whether you've walked that road individually or not, but just understand that, hey, this is the challenge you're confronted with. This is what has worked or hasn't worked for me or my clients or whatever it may be. And, the coaching in general, like if you're going to trying to get in great shape, there's a decent chance that you could hire yourself a personal trainer, right? If your marriage is on the rocks, you should probably go see a counselor. If you're trying to work through some things, go see a therapist, right? You have all these sort of guides and experts to sort of help us through this journey in all different aspects of our life. You can take a music and, learn to play a musical instrument, learn a new language. There's all these things that you can do. You need help doing it. And I think that the leadership piece in particular is often an afterthought because it's sort of that, well, now I need to learn how to be a leader, right? I've been a great operator. I've been a great performer. I've been a great producer. And suddenly now I'm managing a team of 200 people, right? Never had to do that before. I better figure out how to do that. And that's a big lift. And so there's just a lot that sort of rolls up into that where, I think that the really effective ones are going to be able to leverage AI. But ultimately that's the tool to get it into the human's hands where the real magic's going to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. When you said that, I was like, oh yeah, we've been in an information age, and now it's like, but that's like at that point, it was just like, who had the encyclopedias? It's not like everyone has it. Like,
Right.
not like, what can you do with it now?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and it's what I also get about you, and I'll reflect this back here, Billy, is that what I feel from you is that you are positive, forward thinking, with vision and alignment as well. Like your response to that there was like it was a different take than I've heard in the past, and there wasn't any like nihilism in it. You know what I mean? Like it was really fun. It was just like, hey, look, we do have this tool. It is here, and I think that the more that I experience it, the more I'm like, oh, it can help me a lot more than I thought, but not as much as I thought. At the same time, it's like
Yeah.
it's like this interesting balance between it. Yeah, I want to take the conversation in a different direction, or at least a little bit of a different direction. You brought up earlier. A game of failure, and I thought that was just really choice words. I like that mental picture there, right? And you're like, 7 out of 10 times, like you're striking out, like you're not getting the base, and I think that there's something in there that I would love to take on and explore right here for us outliers out here, because you talk about high performance, you talk about being a high achiever, and like we're used to like getting to a point where we're just like regardless of what everyone else's stats are, for us, it feels like we're just hitting home run after home run after home run, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear from you, and let's now bring this into your business and how you grow things out for yourself. Like, how have you embraced the game of failure for yourself? And if you're down for it, like share with us something recent that came on where you're like, all right, I'm still in the game here. Like this is I'm still Hall of Fame status, but like at the same time, like this goes down.
Yeah, I've got an interesting relationship with failure, because in a weird way, I view this honestly as through the lens of a father more than anything, because I feel that life, this, I'll be the old man, sort of get off my lawn at this point, but right, like life for my kids versus life for me, is very, very different. It's much easier. Just like life for me was much easier than it was for my parents and their parents, et cetera, et cetera. You go back generations, right? And there's a lot of wonderful things about that. I have a little bit of concern over, are we smoothing out too many of the roadblocks, as a parent, and saying, what are you going to do when you face some real adversity, and how do you respond to that? I think that resiliency is a absolute superpower in my mind. The ability to come back from a failure or from a disappointment is the ultimate separator. It is what separates somebody from being a nice player in the major leagues to an all-star and turning somebody into a Hall of Famer. It's what separates somebody from, being a first-time failed founder into, a fourth-time billionaire because they just stuck to it. And there's so much there. I've got a quote from Peter Thiel or an anecdote from Peter Thiel that I draw on often. And he had this theory that not everybody, but a overwhelmingly high percentage of first-time founders, successful founders, I should say, were somewhere in the autism spectrum. And the reason, his theory behind that, was that all of these pressures from the outside world, You're running out of funding. You don't have the team to support you. People are, they're doubting your concept. You haven't proven anything yet. There's all this pressure that tells you no, you can't do it. And his theory is that they just kind of block that. They just have this innate ability to block that out. They're not as affected by that. So they soldier on and they persevere, and they stay in the game long enough. And suddenly, what do you know? We've got a successful company. And that where a lot of us may fall by the wayside. There's just too many reasons why it won't work. And so that's you never want to seek out adversity. Um, I shouldn't say never, but there are most times you don't want to seek out adversity, right? But I do have this weird relationship with it where it does happen, and I failed plenty of times. So maybe that's where I've kind of built up this muscle memory. I immediately pivot. I'll cry my Cheerios for a day and I'll feel sorry for myself, but then I make a hard pivot and I say, what can I learn from this? Where can I get better? Where did I go wrong? Where did somebody else go wrong and it impacted me, right? What could I have done better? That sort of extreme ownership mentality of, if it failed and I'm a leader, did I not do a good enough job of explaining that? Did I not support them enough? Right? Where did I go wrong? And so, I looked at, again, through going back to the lens of a father. How do you let them struggle? I was talking to a buddy. He said, you want them to fall out of the tree and skin their knee. You don't want them to break their leg, but you want them to kind of get a bump and bruise every now and then. And I think that particularly with the younger generation, and I think they get a bad rap for a lot of different reasons. But the folks that come out of that generation in particular that that have some resiliency, that can sit down and interface and have a conversation and be self-aware and humble enough to say, yeah, I've failed a million times, right? And not see shame in that, right? Build up that scar tissue. To me is powerful, and that shows that, yeah, you've tried, right? If you've got no calluses on your hands and you've got this 50-page dissertation on why this business is going to work, that's great. I'm going with the guy that's bumped and bruised and he's got the fire in his belly, because he's not going to quit. And so I'm not sure if I've answered your question or not. It's roundabout, but the failure element is something that I've told a lot of young people this. At one point I played Division I college baseball, and I came out and I wanted to work in baseball. And it's like, you think you have all this like value add, right? Hey, I know the game. I can do this. I can do that. In reality, you don't know anything, and you're not supposed to know anything, right? You're 21, 22, 23 years old coming out of college, or you're 18 or 19 coming out of high school. You don't know anything. That's totally fine. Embrace that you don't know anything. But what I tell these athletes in particular, again, it's my bias showing, but you have learned to be a part of a team. You have learned to compete. You have learned to fail and to bounce back from that. You have learned to put in work when nobody's paying attention. Right? You've learned when to follow, when to talk, when to listen. You've learned all these things, maybe without even realizing it, just by being an athlete and competing. And those skill sets, and I realized this when I transitioned out of professional sports, because that was essentially my entire life, up until that point, that not everybody has that. So if you do have that you hang your hat on that every single day, because that is an asset that you have that not everybody has. Right. So lean into that. Don't be like, hey, I'm a washed up old jock and blah, blah, blah. Like, you got to evolve. You got to keep growing. Right. Don't show me your high school football tape and tell me how great you were. Right. Like, you give me more than that. But the lessons that you learn there are valuable. Right. And so, and it took me seeing people that didn't have that weren't bothered by letting their team down, that didn't have accountability when they missed the deadline, to realize the light went off for me. I'm like, oh, okay. that is an asset that people have that they need to leverage as much as they possibly can. So that's, kind of my philosophy on failure and resilience, and how you can, I think, turn that really into a strength.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in there, and I what I'm hoping here, outliers, what I would like you to do is like spend some time with what Billy just said and see like what in there like really resonates for you. Don't just let this wash over, because what, like, Billy, I think there's like 10 different like great nuggets in there. And I'm gonna share that one of the ones that's coming up for me as you're talking. Um Interestingly, the one that got me was when you talked about like leaving the like once you got out of like the baseball world, once you got out of the sports world, and you saw that like other people didn't have these other skills. And I think about that here from the standpoint of like how much, and I'm asking myself, how much am I right now like judging myself, like moving, pushing myself toward a goal that like honestly might already be in like the 95th percentile, you know, but because I'm just surrounding myself with a certain group of people and I see that some people have it more than me and they have a level of success or level of ease, like whatever it is that like that I'm thinking about, that I'm missing the bigger picture. I'm missing like what actually already lasts as an asset. And it's like, okay, now it's time to actually go work on something else. This is something else that's there. So there's something in that mix that reminds me to get out of my normal environments to be able to see some of my to basically grow my own awareness again in a new way. I didn't expect like I was tracking with you and all the failures. I was with it there, and then you brought this one up. I was like, oh yeah, like you can't. It's what they say, like a fish swimming in water. Like you can't like they may not know that they're in water because they're just always in water. It's just how it
Right.
is, you know.
Yep.
What any thoughts on that? Anything come to
Yeah, I
mind for
think
that?
that as you were talking, it triggered something for me. Again, going back to part of the genesis behind my coaching and getting out of sports, one of the things I realized is that if you find yourself surrounded with a group of elite performers, right? That can be the best baseball players in the world. It can be musicians, chefs, artists, entrepreneurs, you name it, right? If you find yourself in a room with them, shut up and listen. You know what I mean? Like there is a lot to learn from high performers, and it really doesn't matter. And that's what I've learned through my podcast and conversations. I always sought out conversations with people, and somebody eventually said, "Hey, just you need to start recording these because there's good stuff there, right?" And so I was always seeking the growth because I'm like, all right, what is this person doing? I just admire them. I want to talk to them. Let me pick their brain. Let me talk for an hour. And if you walk away from that conversation with one nugget, it's like, okay, I got it. Like now I just got better. I just got a new tool in my tool belt. But what I've learned is that, it's very easy to watch guys playing on TV. Right now, the playoffs are going on. You watch these guys at night on ESPN, and you're like, man, that's a different species than me, right? Like I can't do that. I can't imagine being able to do that. You can say the same thing about any walks of life, a surgeon, a musician, right? A public speaking, you name it. And in reality, you see behind the scenes, right? You see what, no pun intended here, you see what's going on when nobody's watching. You see how hard they work and how much they grind. And honestly, it's a matter of sort of compounding consistency every single day. Yes, they're absolutely incredibly talented, but there are so many things that people can do. They're sort of undersell themselves because they assume there's this there's this aura of God just reached down and touched them and they're blessed. And that is the case in some places, in some instances, right? But there are other people, like the person who is born independently wealthy versus the self-made man, right? There's some people just grind their way to it and commit and grow a little bit more every single day. And you do that over 20 years and you look up, you're like, oh, look at me. I'm a major league baseball player, right? Like, so there's a lot there where it's very easy to sort of undercut yourself when you're saying, I can't do that. I can't be a CEO, right? Like I'm a numbers guy. I'm an accountant. Like that's my background. I can maybe be a CFO someday. Well, why not? Just because you're a fish who's always been in water and you've never had to like figure it out. Like you ever tried to walk on land, right? There's a lot and then use that same analogy I was talking about earlier. That's going to probably require that current CEO pulling you out of the water every now and then and making you walk a little bit and seeing how you do and supporting you in doing that and things like that. So, there's a lot of, it's the one thing I've learned through my conversations that a lot of them are on my podcast is you talk to elite performers in sports, in business, in the military, you name it, and you just kind of feed the transcript into ChatGPT and say pull out the common themes. There's a lot of commonality that comes out, and I can just feel it in real time as you're having these conversations. Right? It's discipline, it's focus, it's commitment, it's selflessness, it's humility, and you're like, yep, got it, understood. Right? And then you, lo and behold, you look up; these are like wildly successful, impressive people.
And it's an interesting thing with what you're saying. There's one of my big things right now is longevity, and I've gotten to the place in business and in life where I'm like, oh, okay, like things have like a decade is gonna go by, and when I think about where I was a decade ago and where I am now, it's like I couldn't have guessed. Like this, I just couldn't have. There's directionally, I would have wanted some things. I think I'm in alignment with that. I'm not like, but like there's other things where I'm like, I just didn't even know I didn't know at this
Yeah.
point, right? And so some of what I feel like some of what's resonating with me in this year is just this idea of uh yeah, it's like of like, okay, the consistent improvement and what happens like when you just stick with something for a long time. And like I'll admit for myself right now, there's some I feel like I'm going through a level change. I can it was a mindset thing, and then once the mindset came in, like the mindset was, oh, I'm everything I do, I'm here to change the world. All right. And so like this podcast conversation we're having, I'm asking myself consistently, like, all right, this is how I change the world. Like, so what, like, where are the world changing elements of it? And it occurred to me just the other day that I'm like, oh, now that I'm playing at this level, things that I used to be able to tolerate no longer make sense. It doesn't it, like it's just falling out, and it's. I'll be honest, I'm disappointed because I had just gotten to like I had just gotten it right. I was comfortable, you know. But I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh no. Like literally, I'm just
Yeah.
like it's small and things that I didn't even think like I had prided myself on. I'm like, oh, I do it this way. Like, and now I'm like, for this next level, for who I see myself being, and for the people that I want to reach, it's not fake it till you make it. It's not that. It's like, all right, let me make sure that I'm actually showing up at the level that is required or like for this year. And almost like not expecting to get the lottery results from not by not playing. It's like I can make $1 million a lot of different ways. One of them is playing the lottery every day. The other one is saving and doing like, going to work and saving. Like one of them is more guaranteed than the other, but you can get it either way. That's something I'm addressing right now. What's coming up to you on that, Billy?
Yeah, no, it's what you just said harkens back to what you mentioned earlier from a client and a business owner perspective, right? Is there's just different evolutions, right? They're all good. They're good problems to have, right? Sometimes you land too much business and you're like, I don't know if I can deliver on this. It's a good problem to have, right? Figure it out. Sometimes you're just starving and you can't find business. That's not as good of a problem to have, but figure that one out too. And so you're talking through your evolution personally, right, and professionally. It's no different than building a business. The skill set and the team and the approach you need when you're going from 0 to 1, when you're starting that scrappy little startup in your basement, that's a totally different skill set from when you get to the evolution just a couple ticks away of a scale up. Now we've sort of proved this concept that works in this fishbowl. We got to go to a little bit of a bigger fishbowl to see if it still works, right? So we're going to go from one market to three, or we're going to go from East Coast to national, whatever it may be. And that's a very different skill set from, Fortune 500, sustainable, proven, established business. Now maybe the leadership team can say the same, but they're going to have to be pretty dynamic, to go from to evolve. Maybe they're evolving with the business, but there's a reason that new executives are installed at different sort of growth phases. It's not always the right decision, right? It's not always the right fit, but in my former life, it's a very different skill set. I went through a rebuild at one of the organizations I was with, meaning we tore it down to the studs. We knew we were not going to be very good for a couple of years, but we did that intentionally and with thought toward building a championship caliber organization. We're going to be bad now, and I think we're going to be really good 5 years from now.
Okay,
And it turned out to be true. That's a very different skill set than saying we're built to win the World Series this year. So we've got to maximize that window. We've got to win now. It's a building versus sort of an executing a sustaining mindset, I would say.
all right, I get you brought this in. Now I'm really curious about this, right? The element of hey, because like if you're playing at the level you're playing, you had something that was working enough, but it wasn't working enough to get you to the goals that you wanted, right? And I think that that level of pivoting, at least like I hear it, I see that like people are like this is a rebuilding year. Like I hear it in sports and things like that. But now that I'm talking to you, I'm like, but what does it actually take to be able to like sit back and say, okay, hold on, we're going to be making some major changes and like we're going to have to go reinvest. Our model worked up until this point, and now we have to go back and remodel, retool, and basically come in again. Like when I hear you say that, Billy, I think there's some times where I've thought about my own business where I'm like, oh, that would have been helpful, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but there's a level in which when you say it, it almost feels like inevitable. But I'm curious about like when you're making the decision. Like I want to slow down. Like I just want to get like juicy in it. Like I see it
Yeah.
from far away, but like when you're making a decision, you're like, hey, we're gonna have to start this whole thing up, re-envision what's gonna be a championship team. How does that come about?
Yeah. I mean, look, anybody that's in that space in particular, right, is very competitive. They don't like losing.
Hmm.
So academically, you can evaluate your roster and your budget and your organization and your talent pipeline and all these things, and you sort of do the calculus and say, we're not there. We're not there. And sometimes you can do the mental gymnastics to kind of trick yourself into saying, but we might be there in 2 years. If we make every right decision, we might be there in 2 years, right? And so then if you do that, sometimes if you do it once, but certainly if you do it more than once, so you're sort of cutting your own throat. You've got to be realistic about where you are. Now it's again, it's one thing sort of academically and theoretically to say, okay, it's time to rebuild. Um, and you can make those decisions and you view them all through that lens. This is not a now lens, right? We're looking future. So we're going to bet on upside. We're going to bet on development. We're going to bet on our ability to impact that talent and get it to where it's a championship caliber. And I think a lot of good organizations in independent sport do that, right? They take people that come out of the special forces and military, they take ex athletes, or they take ex entrepreneurs, and they just say, "Yeah, come in here, join our program. We will help you." Right? The military is notorious for it. They take these people, that are kind of wandering and lost, and they turn them into Marines, and they turn them into these upstanding individuals and members of society, right? So there's all these sort of approaches to sort of development in that sense. Um, but it's entirely different once they sort of sound the bell, and then you start losing and you start losing a lot. It's you view these organization or these decisions for your organization on paper, and you're like, I know this is the right thing to do. Like, I'm very convicted in that, and it's going to be painful. Um, but baseball is 162 game long season. That's a lot of suffering, and it's usually not a 1 year rebuild. There's usually a few years where you're like, this is going to suck for a while, and it's hard, to go through it. But if you've got clarity and direction, if you've got people that are aligned in why you're doing what you're doing, it's a lot easier to get through it because look, misery loves company, right? So we're going to go through this together. That's going to be our crucible moment. If we don't get fired before we get out of this, this rebuild, we have
Yeah,
faith that it'll
yeah,
work,
yeah.
and that's the other thing, right? Like, it's professional sports. It's a performance business. You get hired, you get fired. So you've got to have a little bit of guts to say, not just say it yourself, but to say it to your boss, the guys that are signing the check, saying, we're not going to be very good this year. We're not going to be very good next year. We're not going to be very good the next year, the year after that, right? Like, that's, you better have good answers as to why that is, right? And the answer for us at the time was because it's going to put us on this path to be hopefully raising a banner and lifting a trophy over our heads a few years from now. So there's a lot that goes into it, and quite honestly, something that I enjoyed maybe every bit as much as the on the field rebuild was the off the field. Sometimes you have to revamp your infrastructure, your staffing, your process. There's a lot that goes into the sporting world that people don't appreciate. There's hundreds of people that support that organization. It's not just 9 guys in a uniform on TV, right? There's a lot that goes into it, and being aligning those two interests and trying to build something, to use your word, sustainable with some longevity. Like, that's what I love, right? Can I build something that will last? Anybody can get lucky. I can win the lottery, right? Probably not going to win the lottery twice, right? But like, I could build a successful business. Can I do it again? Right? I can win the division. Can I win it back to back? That sort of thing. That's what fuels me. That's the competitive sort of cycle that you get on. And it's a lot of fun while you're doing it.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad we went here, Billy, because even just that last bit, like that's one of the biggest shifts that happened for me in the last few years is where the longevity part came in, where it's like I realized that as an outlier, I was doing really incredible things. I had my highlight reel of like, here goes something I did, here goes this other thing I did, here goes this other thing I did. I think it was when I started having kids, honestly. But like something came where I was like, oh, I need this to like keep happening. Like, and it was really cool to do it once, you know, but like now I'm like, that's no longer cool for me. Like, can you keep doing it? Can you have it being done when you're not there? Like all these things, like the game itself changed. It became less about how much flash can I get and how much and really how sustainable can I make it. And when you say this, I appreciate. I appreciate you talk like getting into like the pain of it all, right? Getting into like, hey, we have to get 3 years worth of buy-in right here. And it's easy to get like not easy. It's one thing to get buy-in at the beginning to start it. And it's another thing that once you're in it and you're like, you talk about 162 game season. I'm like, work is 260 working days every year,
Right. Right.
like you're like, we just did this reorg. And in the middle of the reorg, you're like, we got to reorg again because we're not like, there's an element of this that I think is just, it really speaks to like creating organizational excellence and what I hear is like building with the right foundation in mind and when that foundation isn't there being like look we can build this to a 6 story thing but it's not going to be 100th story and so if we got to do that we got to start all over. Any last thoughts on that and we'll start wrapping up for today.
Yeah, no, I think you triggered a few things for me. One was the alignment. The organizational alignment is critical, and you can say I do this a lot. I just ask questions, right? It's what do you want to do? Hey, we want to win the World Series. Okay, great. We all do. Like how and why, right? Like how are you going to go about doing that? What's your philosophy? What's your strategy? Who's on your team? What are you going to do? Same thing as saying, well, we want to make a bunch of money. Okay, is that it? Like, is that the goal? Is there any, no? Okay, that's fine. If that's your goal, great. How are you going to go about doing that? What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? Right. And so I spend a lot of time sort of on cultural architecture is what I call it, and getting those foundational pieces in place, saying, which is hard to do, right? It people think they have it dialed in until you start playing devil's advocate and poking holes in what they're telling you, and then they realize that it's closer to like a bumper sticker or a t-shirt than it is really like a mission statement or sort of an ethos. But if you can get it boxed in, every decision you make after that becomes easier because it either fits in that box and it's hell yes or it's no. And so we did that with the rebuild. And all that being said, hey, we're gonna be bad, we're gonna be bad, we're gonna be bad. At one point, my boss looks over and we were through one of our several doldrums of a season, and he just goes, 7 losses in a row. I'm like, I know. I don't remember we talked about this a couple months ago. We were going to be bad. We're bad. Right. So it's like you have to kind of remind, but we're bad with intent, And so, companies have to do this. I'd much rather have to take a little bit of a step back a year early than have to take a massive step back, a year late, and wind up laying people off or closing the doors entirely or whatever it may be. Things falling apart on you because you didn't have the discipline and the courage to say, I'm going to do it now and it's going to be painful, but I know it's the right thing to do. That's really easy for you and I to sit here and say in a conversation, right? When it's your bank account or your business or your family or your team, it's hard. It's hard. So it's got to be thoughtful. It's got to be strategic. And that doesn't make it any easier, but hopefully it sort of keeps you pointed in the right direction.
Well, I appreciate this, Billy. Like, I think we've had a conversation that's gone in a number of aligned directions here, and I think that what I like to do, I don't always do this, but it feels right in this conversation. I'm going to ask you 3 questions to wrap us up. All right. The
Sure.
first one is let's do this. I like this order. The first one is what I'm going to ask you for an outsight. An outsight to me is a message that you want to like leave directly with any outlier that's listening here, right? This is your message for them to take away, and then afterwards we're going to shift a little bit here. So, what outsight do you have for them? And then let us know the best way for them to go deeper down the journey. So, what do you want to share with them, and then what's the best way they can continue with you?
Sure. So I came to a realization not that long ago, quite honestly, where part of my identity is I'm an athlete, right? And that has nothing to do with what my body can or can't not do at this stage in my life, right? It's got to do with sort of who I am, what I believe, what I hold true, and it doesn't mean that you're an athlete and that's what I'm trying to sort of suck everybody into. It means you have an identity and you have something you stand for, right? You can be an artist, you can be a caretaker, you can whatever sort of however you self-identify, right? Embrace that and lean into it because then everything else after that becomes easier, and I'm a big believer that, elite organizations by definition are not for everybody. They are selective. You can't just say, I want to go be a Navy SEAL or I want to go to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. It doesn't work that way. Similarly, high performers aren't for every organization, right? So you have to know what you want out of life. You need to know what you're looking for and how you want to go about doing that. Because if you are a freewheeling remote work, you know, gunslinger that needs that freedom to excel, and you're saying yes to something that's going to box you in and tie your hands behind your back and make you play by the rules all the time, that's probably not the right fit for you. It doesn't mean you're not talented. It just means it's not the right fit. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong either. Again, it's all about sort of finding your home and then leveraging that and leading into that. And that can change, to your point, right? Like your why and your how, that evolves, that changes. So sometimes people feel like that's a failure. I just think it's an evolution and you should embrace it and say, okay, yeah, that was important to me 10 years ago. It's not as important anymore. This is now what's important. So I'm going to go seek out that. And that, if you seek those things out with conviction, I think success tends to follow.
I love it. I love it. Billy, how can people go deeper down the journey with you?
And so my website is nooneiswatching.com. It's got my podcast, my blog, and my coaching website as well. So please reach out directly. All my contact information is on there. I seek out conversations like this. I enjoy it. It helps me grow. There's a lot of good stuff out there in the world if you're looking for it. So if anybody wants to reach out, send me a message, have a conversation. I'm all for it.
I love it. And you touched about how it helps you grow. The last question I asked is for your insight, right? So we had our outside before. That was for the outliers. This one's about you. I don't, like I said, every time I do one of these conversations, this is how I change the world. And so I'm curious for you, in what way has this conversation been impactful for you? What's an insight or a takeaway that you're leaving this conversation for yourself?
Yeah, well, part of the reason I seek out conversations like this is I'm a thinker, I'm a reader. I like to learn, I like to grow, but I learn more from dialogue than I do from monologue. And the evolution of me was, it started when I was during COVID. I started writing just to kind of therapeutic reasons for myself more than anything, just to get some thoughts out, and it evolved from there. And I don't care how talented or captivating a variety you are, it's still my voice that you're just going to sort of digest and absorb. So I seek out conversations because I think you can learn and listen, right? And there's a big difference between listening and waiting for your turn to talk. And we all know those people that, they're nodding along and you can see the jaw muscles are flexing because they're just waiting to talk, versus the folks that are sitting there and actually taking their time and maybe not responding immediately, waiting a beat or two because they're soaking in what you have. And so I've always appreciated that with people. I try to surround myself with people that are like that, because if they're listening, odds are they're growing. And if you're going to surround yourself with a tribe like that, sort of rising tide lifts all boats, and you're going to have that sort of growth mindset that's going to be sort of extrapolated out over your, not just your professional circle, but your social, your family, all of it. You're just, hey, how can I get better today? What can I do to be a better father, a better husband, a better professional, a better washed up old athlete, whatever it may be, right? Like, how do I get better? What can I do today? So
How
these
does that apply?
conversations help me do that.
How did that, like, maybe give us something like one takeaway, make it real for us in this conversation.
In this conversation. Yeah. So I think hearing you talk about your journey evolving through, I had a similar conversation not that long ago where you're so focused on, you're so focused directionally. Yeah, I'm still heading toward the North Star. Everything else is okay. That there are times you can lose sight of that because that becomes the default. You're like, yes, I'm getting better every day. Yes, I'm doing, but that's a given, right? And a lot of high performers have that. Like, they don't celebrate every little win, right? Now, if you can zoom out, or have, sometimes it just takes somebody else holding up a mirror and saying, hey man, have you remember where you were 10 years ago? You see where you are now? Like, pretty impressive, right? Like, keep doing it, but the reality is, if you paused every so often, every couple days, and said, hey, look at me, I'm doing good, you wouldn't be where you are right now. It's that drive that keeps people going, where it's human nature. You focus on the failures. You don't focus on the successes, right? You go 3 for 10, you're focused on the 7 outs you made. You're not like, oh man, those 3 hits were great, And so it's that human nature, and it's healthy to a degree, but you've got to understand or appreciate, getting back to what I said earlier, that like, the people that do these incredible things, they're the same species as you. We're all human beings, like, They may come from a different place, they may have different skills than you, but the thing that ultimately got them where they were was this, just their commitment to that craft. And so just commit to it, right? And so just stack those wins day after day after day. And to your point, like those wins may not feel as meaningful as they were 10 years ago. That doesn't mean they're not meaningful. It just means that they may not feel that way to you because you're grown and now you just move the goalpost, 20 yards further away, but it's still in the same direction, you know?
Spoken like a true high performer right there, right? Well, outliers, we're going to end our conversation here. My ask is that you go and you share this out with your world. This podcast grows by word of mouth, and like we bring on incredible people who are up to big things in the world for a reason. And one of those reasons might be that there's someone in your world right now who really needed this conversation. There's something that happened here with Billy and myself where this conversation would really support them. My ask is that you think about that one person and you send them this episode as a gift and let them know, like, hey, I heard this and I was thinking about you. That thing we were talking about last week, that thing you came to me about, that like that place where you're feeling stuck. This conversation, I think, has something for you. We call it the one person, one conversation at a time initiative. As much as it's about getting out into the world once, like there's something here where I'm like, 10 years from now, the number of people who might listen to this specific episode because it keeps reaching the right person at the right time, like to me, I think that's where all the impact comes in. So if you would join us in it, that would mean the absolute world to me. All right. Until the next time we talk outliers, remember, be you on purpose. Journey on.